So this is what an individual neuron or nerve cell looks like. The cell body up there at the top is the gray, and it's got these little arms reaching out from, and those reach out to all the other neurons in the vicinity. And it's got this long tube called the axon, and the axon is what actually sends the signals. So the dendrites receive signals, the axon moves the signal down to the axon terminals, and that sends it out to more dendrites. So this is all going on in split-second time. Millions and millions and millions of signals are going on inside your brain right now, just so that you can make sense of sitting here in a chair, knowing who you are, listening to my words, sequencing them, figuring out what they mean, etc. And you're probably at the same time, you've got other neurons firing, saying, who is this person? You know, did I take the chicken out of the freezer? What am I doing here? So you've got other thoughts going on. And then you've got all kinds of unconscious or subconscious, depending on your orientation, things going on that are managing your heart rate, managing your swallowing, managing your digestion, etc. So your brain is in charge of all of that. And it needs trillions of signals per second in order to do it. This is kind of what it looks like when they're all together. So they're all packed, as I said, very densely, but it turns out there's a little tiny bit of space between each neuron. So how do we get there? I'm going to give you a little tour of reproduction, because this is really where the nervous system starts. The nervous system starts with an egg and the sperm. So here we have an egg and a sperm, or a series of sperms. And what happens when those two collide, because they really do collide, is the sperm's head gets blown off. The sperm had 23 chromosomes, and the egg had 23 chromosomes. Now the united system has 46 chromosomes, which is what's in every single one of your cells. It's 46 chromosomes that are hopefully exact duplicates of those initial chromosomes. Now what happens is the cell divides, and then it divides again, and then it divides again. And by the time we get to down here where it says C, you have the beginning of a nervous system. So that's where your nervous system started, long before your mother even had any idea that she was pregnant. That's how old our nervous systems are and how intricate and complicated. So here's another diagram of it. This is inside the ovary. There's some fertilization going on there at day 0. So before this blastocyst right here has even settled onto the wall of the uterus, there's a nervous system going on. So it's our most primitive system. It's there before the heart, it's there before any sensory organs, it's there before any muscles or bones or anything. So I have a little video that shows what this development looks like. Should I stop?
No, I was just thinking that on this side it's difficult to see.
If you can't, yeah, you can move to the center.
But
Yeah, these things are really sorry. Okay, so I'm going to start this little video because this is one of the most miraculous things I know of. So we're at day 15 here. So there's a couple hundred cells, and you see that line starting there. That is the beginning of your spinal cord. This is at day 16. This is before your mother knew she was pregnant. You're about 1 millimeter in size, and that turquoise part there is going to form the brain. The little dots are beginnings of your spinal nerves, which go out to all the different parts of your body. I wish I had this to music. It's really pretty amazing. And that neural tube, the neural folder, that closes up, and so everything that was on the outside is now on the inside. So you started out with your nervous system on the outside, so you could sense what was going on in that very watery environment. And then it closes up, and here it is, not even a month old. We have the beginnings of the human nervous system. It's pretty amazing, isn't it? So this is what it looks like inside, and there's the spinal cord and the very beginnings of the brain. The next video will show you what happens next. Let's see. So there's already a heartbeat, even though there's not a fully developed heart. But this is just going to show you the brain and what happens to it. So this video unfortunately drops off the body, but you can see what happens. We're at day 100 here. You already have all the basic structures of the brain. We're at 8 months, we have a brain, and there's a fully formed brain at 9 months. So basically, what the point of that is that everything kind of folded up inside this pink stuff. So we started out with a tube, and it folded up inside the part that's called the cortex. And the reason that's important, I'm going to show you in just a second. But here's the fully developed brain. We have 4 lobes on each side of our brains, and we don't need to talk about what those are really for these purposes, but if you want to know more, ask me, because I love to talk about this stuff. So the valleys are called the sulcus, and the higher parts, the raised parts, are called the gyri. So we have valleys and hills within our brains. And that's important because we need so much brain power in order to walk around and navigate in the world that the brain actually has to fold in on itself. I'm going to really do a very simplified idea of what neuroanatomy is. So you've seen what happened, that inner part folded up inside the outer part. So if you were to take your hand like this, you would have your brainstem would be here. Your thumb would be what is called the paleomammalian brain. And then on top would be the cortex. So it's all tucked up inside itself. Now the reason this is important is there was a guy named Paul MacLean in the 1950s, American physiologist, and he really, in order to try to understand the brain for himself, he was looking at doing something called comparative neuroanatomy. So he was looking at the brains of other kinds of animals. And what he noticed is that humans actually have the same brain as reptiles and the same brain as other mammals, and then on top of that we have something else. So this whole idea, this is called the theory of the triune brain. It doesn't exactly work like that because as we evolved and grew, all these structures grew in together, but I think it's really useful for explaining the way the brain works, and it's also really useful for explaining why it's so important for parents to understand their children's brain development. So, first you have this reptilian brain. It's your brainstem, basically. We have that same brain that a lizard does. It's tucked up inside, underneath all that cortex. And there's a picture of it. So this part in black up here would be what we call our reptilian complex. So think about what a reptile can do. It can mate, it can mark its territory, it can run away if it's in danger, or it can freeze, play dead, shut down. That's about all it can do. It doesn't care for its young, it doesn't learn, it doesn't communicate, it has instincts. Very primitive instincts, but that's all it does. So you've seen the turtles, you've seen the geckos, you've seen the iguanas. Their brains are basically what we have tucked up inside our brains. It's called our reptilian complex. So we can do all those behaviors too. We can mate, we can fight, we can flee, we can shut down, we can mark our territory. That's about it, right? So obviously, because we're complicated beings, we need more than that. But we started out, or evolutionary psychologists believe, that we started out with this reptilian complex. And if you look at a cross-section of the brain, it's right here. This is your brainstem, right there. And what happens when we get stressed is we go right into that reptilian brain. All we can do, basically, is fight, flee, shut down, mate, or mark our territory. And mating is probably questionable. But when we get stressed, we go into that most primitive part of our brain. Does that make sense? Any questions about that? Okay. So there's the reptilian brain, and now we're going to talk about the paleomammalian brain. So we share this with all of the mammals. So the paleomammalian brain is on top of the reptilian brain, and this is what the reptilian brain can do. It can learn and remember, and it cares for its young. You know, all mammals have a separation cry. probably heard baby goats separated from their mothers, or baby kittens separated from their mothers. So they all, and most people think this was the origin of language, but regardless of that, we have this tendency, we have this ability within our paleo-mammalian brain to nurture and be nurtured. That's what the paleo-mammalian brain does best. Also, it learns. So, say, I don't know about Trinidad, but in Grenada we have trash cans on the beach and people put their trash in the beach. And so if there's Kentucky Fried Chicken cans, chicken bones in those trash cans, the dogs on the beach are really smart. They learn which trash cans have the most bones in them, and they tip them over, and that's their dinner. But if you go up to one of those dogs and you say, "What are you doing?" that dog is going to go into his reptilian brain. He's either going to slink away, or he's going to growl at you, or he's going to roll over on his back and be submissive and basically freeze. So fight, flight, freeze. Okay, so even though he has a paleo-mammalian brain and he's been able to learn, what he does when he gets threatened, when he gets stressed, is he goes into his reptilian brain. We do exactly the same thing. Now, when we get stressed, we might be in our thinking part of our brain. We get stressed, we go into this paleo-mammalian part of our brain, where we either tend and befriend, we try to learn something, or the other thing that the paleo-mammalian brain does is it can feel. So it has feelings. We have something called the limbic system. So dogs have, you've seen dogs when they're happy. You've seen them when they're sad. You've seen them when they're scared. You've seen them when they're angry, right? I mean, we've all seen mammals in those states. We haven't seen any lizards in those states because they don't actually have the brain power to have feelings. But mammals, all mammals have feelings.